I presume you're here in order to learn of Magecraft. I'll have you know, there's no room for the weak-willed in this course, and despite your best efforts, the sorcery of our time is but a fraction of what it once was in the Age of Gods. Much of the craft is established through pedigree, and the culture of mages is riddled with deception and moral depravity. That said, if you insist, I shall do my best to educate you in this miserable, yet fascinating world. In our previous lesson, I spoke of pirates and their strange link to the world of Magecraft. There are some pirates who become mages, and some mages who become pirates. In either case, the high seas serve as a fitting foundation for superstition, mystery, and personal creed. It's also the most traditional means of cultural exchange, allowing Magecraft to break free from a regional exclusivity. To pivot in a new direction, today's lesson will focus on the Holy Grail. This includes the genuine artifact, as well as imitations of the Grail used in Holy Grail Wars. Fundamentally, the Holy Grail refers to any number of mysterious goblets referenced in different legends. In that regard, the term Holy Grail is a recurring trope throughout history. Any mythical chalice said to grant wishes, such as healing or eternal youth, can be considered a Holy Grail. One such grail is the Great Grail of Uruk, one of the many treasures kept by King Gilgamesh in his Gate of Babylon. Its origin is uncertain, but because it once contained an abundance of mana, it serves the same function as other artifacts claiming to be the Grail. In Greek mythology, Pandora, the first human created by Hephaestus, was gifted by the gods a mysterious box. Because it contained all manner of evils, she was instructed not to open it. A victim to curiosity, though, she ignored their warning, unintentionally unleashing upon humanity famine, disease, and conflict. Some speculate that Pandora's box also contained blessings, such as Elpis, the spirit of hope. For this reason, it's possible to use Pandora's box in the same capacity as a Holy Grail. Its wish-granting qualities may even surpass the genuine article. Of course, when I say genuine article, I am referring to the most popular Grail attributed with the title. It is the Christian holy relic that we tend to imagine, the cup that Jesus drank from during the Last Supper. Later, during his crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea used that same cup to catch Christ's blood. Thanks to this, Christ's chalice is embellished with all manner of magical properties. Those who drink from it are said to become immortal. Many men have sought this grail to varying success. The greatest challenge in doing so is, obviously, being able to distinguish Christ's vessel from imitations. The Holy Church, for instance, has investigated at least 726 artifacts claiming to be the genuine article. The most famous anecdotes of searching for the Holy Grail come from the legends of King Arthur. In order to miraculously save Britain from famine and declining mystery, Arthur had her Knights of the Round Table search for the Holy Grail, namely Lancelot, his son Galahad, Sir Percival, and Bors. Percival was likely the first to encounter the Grail even before the search began. While staying as a guest in the castle of the Fisher King, he witnessed the Grail being shown off in a procession. It was Galahad, however, who was destined to finally obtain it. Merlin knew this, saving a seat at the round table, known as Siege Perilous, for the one person who would go on to be the perfect knight. Upon joining Arthur's knights, this empty seat was given to Galahad, a chaste man who proved capable of performing miracles. His virtuous journey ultimately led him to Castle Corbinic, where he was gifted the Holy Grail. Originally aiming to bring the Grail back to his king, Galahad instead received divine intervention from Joseph's spirit. Thus, he chose to return the Grail to heaven, ascending alongside it with the guidance of angels. According to this legend, the Christian Grail can no longer be found on Earth. Nonetheless, mages have used the Grail's myth as a foundation for rituals. If anything, the Grail's elusive nature makes it an even better source of mystery, such that invoking its name can draw upon its supposed wish-granting properties. The genuine article is no longer required, and the grails seen in Grail Wars are quite different. A Holy Grail War is, put bluntly, a ritual meant to help mages reach the root. For the Ainsburns, it was a means of reclaiming their lost true magic, Heaven's Feel. Their Fuyuki ritual involves two different things that are both called grails. The Greater Grail is an elaborate spell carved in stone. Its inscription spans around 50 meters of rock within Fuyuki's Mount Enzo. It is fused with Justice Liegerich von Ainsburn as its core, and was created by Justice herself, alongside renowned mages Nagato Tosaka, Makiri Zolgin, and their teacher, Kishur Zelrech Schweinorg. Though the spell is complex, its endgame is surprisingly simple. Gather an absurd amount of mana, and then use that mana to wish for access to the root. Beyond that, reaching the root isn't even its only function. With enough mana, almost any wish can be granted, leading some masters to participate with ulterior motives. In addition to its wish-granting properties, the Greater Grail is programmed to select masters, bestow upon them command seals, and facilitate the summoning of heroic spirits. Servants are supposed to be tools for the planet's will, but through a Grail War, individual mages have been able to summon them as familiars. Doing so essentially manifests heroic spirits at the planet's expense. A servant's body, its Saintcraft, consists of extremely dense mana. When a servant dies in battle, that mana is meant to return to the planet, but during a Grail War, that mana is instead gathered as a prize for whomever wins. It powers the Greater Grail, allowing for wishes to be granted. To store this mana, Holy Grail Wars utilize a vessel called the Lesser Grail. It's a glorified container for magical energy, and its exact shape isn't defined. Initially, the Fuyuki Grail Wars used a literal cup, a prototype of the Christian Holy Relic. It was the 726th Grail the Church investigated, which is in part why agents of the Church insist on overseeing the wars. This chalice was utilized in the first 3 wars, until it was damaged as a result of battle. Ever since, the 3 founding families have opted to use a living vessel that can protect itself throughout the war. Ainsburn homunculi proved to be ideal, if not cruel, choices for the vessel. Irisfeel von Ainsburn and her daughter Ilya are both made into their respective wars' lesser grails. As servants fall in battle, these vessels lose functionality until, ultimately, they cease to be anything more than a receptacle for mana. Even if Ilya, who is also a master in the war, were to become its victor, she would still be sacrificed for the rest of her family. Mages themselves can also be used as the Lesser Grail. Zoken Mato, for instance, gathered fragments of a previous Grail and implanted them into his crestworms. By infesting Sakura, the worms turned her into a second vessel for the 5th War. In a different timeline, Gilgamesh is able to rip out Ilya's heart and implant it into Shinji Mato. Thus, even an inept mage like him can become a Lesser Grail, albeit an imperfect one, which, for most cases, will work just fine. The majority of wishes, especially those that are easily accessible within the bounds of reality, don't actually require the Lesser Grail to be filled to capacity. Only true miracles, such as reaching the root, need the mana of all 7 servants in a given war. Despite this being the ultimate goal of the ritual, the 3 founding families failed to account for one fatal flaw. The final servant fed to the Lesser Grail must inevitably be the victor's own partner. Even with command spells, committing this betrayal isn't an easy feat. The Grail can also prove unusable by a master without their servant's help, causing most wars to end prematurely. While Fuyuki was chosen for its fertile mana ley lines, it is possible to extract the Greater Grail for use in another location. Darnik Preston Yugada Millennia does this with the aid of Nazis during World War II. He later betrayed them, relocating the Greater Grail to Trifas in Romania. This became the site of a great Holy Grail War, in which not 7, but 15 servants are summoned. The founding families designed this feature, in the rare chance that all 7 servants teamed up. This makes it easier to fill the Lesser Grail to capacity, but participants will likely have a much harder time with twice the number of foes. Darnik understood he could manipulate and alter the Greater Grail's programming. It's no surprise that since the Grail was made by mages, it could also be altered by them. What was a surprise, however, was how the Greater Grail became corrupted by Angra Mainyu. By tampering with the Grail, the Ainsburns were able to summon an Avenger-class servant into the Third War. Filling this role was the Zoroastrian legend of Angra Mainyu, a being made to shoulder the burden of all the world's evils. When this servant was defeated, it was absorbed into the Lesser Grail, in turn corrupting the Greater Grail into a device that only grants wishes through death, destruction, and violence. No matter how righteous or wholesome the wish given to it, the corrupted Grail will find a way to twist it into a disaster. The Greater Grail in this state can absorb the mana from heroic spirits and use them to give birth to Angra Mainyu in the modern era. In its complete state, the Grail literally starts to resemble a womb, birthing a physical incarnation of pure evil. Interrupting the Greater or Lesser Grail in this form will unleash cursed black mud. A single touch of this mud is enough to immediately taint a heroic spirit, bringing about their alter form. Because Sakura contains fragments of this rotten Grail, her form as a Grail vessel is a dark shadow that devours servants with a carnivorous appetite. Ironically, the least corrupt part of this Grail is Angra Mainyu himself, or rather, the human who was once cursed to become Angra Mainyu. He himself used to be innocent, and as such, can harness the Grail's might for his own interests. In response to Bazette Fraga-McRemitz nearly dying before the Fifth War could even commence, Angra Mainyu gave her, and himself, the chance to pursue happiness within a distorted time loop. It should go without saying that all of this went far beyond what any one mage could possibly predict. Fuyuki's Greater Grail may have its flaws, but it's noticeably more capable than its many imitations. Other mages hoping to recreate the Holy Grail War do so through subcategory wars. Their Greater Grails aren't as elaborate, often malfunctioning. Even those that work tend to support fewer servants than a Fuyuki war, making them incapable of reaching the root from the onset. Beyond the domain of Grail Wars, it's possible for Grails to emerge simply as a result of condensing mana. Strong enough beings, such as gods, can create Grails. Anomalies in space-time, such as singularities, can develop Grail cores that encroach upon proper human history. Holy Grail, then, can be a loose term describing dense hotspots of mana, regardless of whether they take on a Grail's shape. Such Grails were created by Gatia, the amalgamation of Solomon's demon gods. In order to incinerate human history, Gatia placed Grails at critical historic moments. Their mere presence altered history, resulting in the formation of singularities. Chaldea, by obtaining these Grails, would resolve each one. Even more Grails emerged from the Lost Belts, specifically their fantasy trees. The overwhelming mana used to preserve each Lost Belt would condense into a Grail whenever a Tree of Emptiness was destroyed. Chaldea has a storehouse of these Grails, which are used primarily for strengthening Ritska's servants. On that topic, there is actually a heroic spirit many consider to be an anti-Grail. In Greek legend, the progenitor dragon Typhon once consumed an ephemeral fruit thought to grant wishes, only to discover it did the exact opposite. Rather than granting wishes, the fruit would ensure Typhon's wishes never came true, leading to his demise. That very same fruit manifests as a servant under the Pretender class, where it pretends to be Typhon. Its authority is able to counteract the wish-granting properties of a Holy Grail. One final vision we have for the Holy Grail comes from the Moon Cell. After all, the Moon Cell hosts its own Holy Grail Wars, which pit Spiritron hackers against each other for the chance to have their wishes granted by its core. While the Moon Cell automaton contains information about the Holy Grail, functioning like an artificial root, what it refers to as the Holy Grail isn't actually one at all. Instead, the Moon Cell's Holy Grail is merely an access key to the Moon Cell's already tremendous power. In summation, the Holy Grail attributed to Jesus Christ is but one of hundreds spanning human myth and history. Holy Grail is a broad term that refers to all manner of wish-granting chalices. Regardless of their legitimacy, simply invoking something as the Holy Grail gives it mystery. Thus, most of the time, mages use the concept of the Holy Grail more than any particular object. Even more loosely, we can treat any dense mass of magical energy like a grail. They all have wish-granting properties, but only the most rich in mana are able to call upon the root. Holy Grail Wars exist as a means of gathering this mana, but they're far from the most efficient way of doing so. Remaining on the topic of Holy Grail Wars, our next lesson will return to heroic spirits. Their class system, which is ever expanding, can be analyzed in greater detail. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all our anime lore, discussions, and Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or a YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like spicy exclusive vids and early access.
As always, celebrate your fandom. I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Chaos Sonic 1, Trodai Connacht, Steven Elak, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Free Brick, Olympian Doll, Lunar Works, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Crow Calum, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Major, Mayfu Mato, Dionysus, God of Wine and Madness, Caitlin P, Sogai CH, Vladimir Ovna, The Taz 96, Jonathan Padua, Kengo X 77, Alistair Bernadotte, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.